Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Broken Abilities No One Complains About. As it turns out, the first episode did better than I expected, and I had a lot of people ask me to make a part 2 since obviously there are many more than just the 7 or so I talked about in the pilot. So that's what we're going to be doing for today. I want to go through another 6 or 7 abilities in League that I personally think are quite strong but don't get that much attention on account of the champion either being unpopular or because people tend to fixate on something else in their kit. Let's not waste any more time and get right into it. Before we get into the video though, I want to give a shout out to today's sponsor, PUBG Blindspot, which is having an early access release on February 5th. As you're well aware, PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds is one of the most iconic multiplayer battle arena games that came out in 2017, and they just recently released a top-down 5v5 FPS mode. You can think of it like a MOBA version under the same IP as the original PUBG. Unlike other games of the same genre, Blindspot still incorporates a lot of shooter elements despite being top-down, including all your favorite weapon types like submachine guns, ARs, pistols, grenade launchers, rifles, and whatnot for you to adopt your own playstyle preference. FPS titles can be rather beginner-unfriendly, so to accommodate that, they have a team deathmatch search and destroy game mode that offers a lower barrier to entry, and contrary to its name, Blindspot allows you to see the line of sight of other players in your team in real time, offering more expanded fields of vision and better awareness of where to fight and when to fight. The game's trying to reinvent tactical shooting by delivering a high-tempo, close to mid-range experience with a low skill floor and high skill ceiling. So if you're interested in checking it out, you can use my link on screen, which is also in the description below, and get ready for the early access coming out soon. Thanks again to PUBG for sponsoring the video, but for now, let's get back on topic. You know, I've been talking about Maokai a lot recently, I kinda noticed that, but that's because he's honestly a really cool champion and a fun tank to play, if only he had his ult ultimate. Either way, for today we're going to be mentioning his sapling toss. It's arguably the most underrated aspect of his kit and one of the reasons he used to be a very stable top laner. You just couldn't gank him. With a cast range of 1100, Maokai can throw a tiny sapling to an area that grants full vision around it, not unlike a ward. Saplings hang for around 30 seconds, or if they're in a brush, depending on how much bonus health Maokai has, towards the mid to late game they can typically stick around for upwards of a minute. When nearby enemies get within range of the sapling, it is a very cute popping jump animation before scampering towards them and exploding after a short while or when it makes contact. If the sapling's in a rush, the damage is empowered to be quite considerable, so what you basically have is a ward that doubles as a zoning tool. Even though a single sapling doesn't do anywhere near the same damage as say a Teemo Shroom, the psychological discouragement of getting hit by one is enough to make people not want to brazenly walk through a brush with a sapling in it. Also typically with an AP item or two like Leandri's, an empowered sapling is enough to chunk a quarter of your health, maybe more. Back when this ability did max health damage, people used to go double burn with Leandri's and Demonic Embrace during the Mythic item era and stack a bunch of saplings in one brush to quite literally one-shot a squishy target. Of course, damage isn't the only reason I'm including it here. It's the fact that you basically have rewards that you can throw from a far distance. It is next to impossible to ambush a team with Maokai in it because you can scale for enemy champions at a safe distance, not only diminishing your element of surprise but making it cumbersome for you to navigate the map discreetly, since by late game he can usually throw one every 10 seconds or less, a powerful macro tool that almost never gets made anymore. If anything, it's the opposite. I can't remember exactly when they did it, but Riot took away a lot of champion scouting tools because they felt it would be unfair to provide free vision, like Trundle Pillar, Gangplank Barrel, and Nivea W used to provide vision I remember. Also, traps like Shaco Box, Teemo Shroom, and Jin Flower used to give full vision like a ward as opposed to partial vision like they do now. Sapling Toss is one of the few abilities to have retained all of its vision control properties since the day he came out. Pivoting to a more straightforward ability, the next one I want to talk about is Garen's W, Courage. Of all the abilities in his kit, hardly anyone directs their ire towards this one. Mind you, it's because people usually bitch about how he basically has a Warmog's armor for a passive or how Judgment does like 2000 damage in the mid to late game, or, you know, the outplay button. But honestly, I think the main reason why Garen's such a pain in the ass to deal with is not because he does too much damage to you, more that he's allowed to basically build full DPS and still be resilient as he is. Think about it for a moment. Darius, Urgot, Nasus, Fully Bear and such only had the luxury of building 1 or 2 DPS items at most before they had to go tank. When was the last time you saw Garen do that? Probably never in the past half decade, right? He typically rushes berserkers and goes full crit, and yet for some reason he still tanks almost as well as every other juggernaut. You have Courage to thank for that. Passively, Garen builds up to 30 bonus armor and magic resist after reaching 150 CS, which is already good to get for free, and believe it or not, it used to give an extra 10% of each on top of that. But when activated, Garen acquires a shield for a short amount of time that also comes with a whopping 60% tenacity buff followed by 4 seconds of damage mitigation, which past rank 3 diminishes more damage than exhaust. Basically, when Garen presses W, anyone who damages him gets exhausted. Courage is precisely the reason why it's so difficult to actually train with Garen. His W is what allows him to get away with building full damage while still retaining some semblance of durability. Up to 40% damage mitigation for 4 seconds, not to mention a shield for the first second that comes with a 60% tenacity buff, makes it very difficult for you to actually pin Garen down and do enough damage to him before he walks away and regens back up. It's one of the most powerful defensive abilities in the game, only really kept in check by the fact that it's on Garen. Other bruisers would love to have this ability. I'm sure even Mundo would rather have Courage than Heartsabber. When it comes to auto attack empowerments, the first ones to come to mind for overpowered examples would be the likes of Camille Q, Udyr Q, maybe Zahen Q. Generally anything that comes with a stun or knockup or huge amounts of damage. But for my money, Wukong's Crushing Blow deserves attention of its own. While it doesn't come with any hard crowd control, I'd say it's a moot point when factoring what it does have to offer. Normally, empowered auto attacks only give you 25 to 50 bonus attack range to account for the brief moment you stop to auto attack before resetting with said empowerment. Wukong's Q goes beyond that. Crushing Blow at max rank affords you 175 bonus attack range, which when combined with his base of the same amount doubles it to 350 for his next auto attack. At 350 attack range, Wukong can actually attack enemies from a noticeable distance away like through walls or even harass in lane without having to expose himself to enemy melee counterattack. Moreover, subsequent instances of damage to enemy champions either by Wukong or his clone reduce the cooldown of his Q by half a second. That includes auto attacks, Nimbus Strike, and each take of damage from Cyclone. So in application, that 8 to 6 second cooldown is more like 4 to 2. You can spam this move, all the more reason why it's nice that it costs only 20 mana. In addition to adding a ton of bonus damage, especially with a few items, Crushing Blow shreds 30% armor and instant full Black Cleaver shred. When paired with an actual Black Cleaver, more than halves the armor of any target Wukong is attacking. That's how he's able to do so much damage in the mid to late game, not because he has a lot of DPS abilities, more that he shreds everyone's armor. Crushing Blow is one of the most underrated auto attack empowerments in the game. I'm sure many people would rather have a crowd control like a silence or stun, but this one has a lot of unique utility to it that makes it more than valuable to any AD champion. Speaking of auto attack empowerments, Nila's Q Formless Blade might be one of the most powerful single abilities in the game, held back by it being her only real damaging tool and also being on one of the most unorthodox champions in the game, a melee ADC. Both within the context of her kit and isolated from it, however, it's kind of insane how much is packed into it. Passively, Nila gets up to 30% bonus armor penetration based on her crit chance, and that same crit chance also lets her heal from up to 20% of damage dealt to enemy champions, with excess healing beyond full HP turning into a shield. Part of the reason why Nila goes from completely useless in the early game to a contender for strongest ADC in the late game is due to her scaling exponentially parabolic from building crit chance beyond the inherent value critical strikes give to her. Mind you, that's only the passive component to her. The active component's a straight line shot that damages enemies hit, including turrets for some reason, and applies 100% lifesteal to the first target struck. If she hits a target for 4 seconds, Nila's attack range becomes 350, she gets bonus attack speed, and her attacks do full damage in an AoE. This is all on a 4 second cooldown 30 mana cost ability, by the way. If you're wondering why late game Nila's Q heals her for 500 HP per cast and she breaks champions and towers to pieces, that's her Q. It is absolutely insane. She might not be as pentakill happy as Samira or Master Yi, but trust me when I say she's one of the most dangerous champions at 5 or 6 items. At the time of writing this actually, Nila is the highest win rate ADC in the game at 54% or higher because of how much she benefits from the new bot lane role quest. Tryndamere mains would commit unspeakable acts of depravity if it meant getting their hands on her Q. I'm willing to bet they would give up 2 abilities, his Q and W, if it meant getting this move. It is so strong and does so many things. At max crit, Nila gets something like 60% armor penetration and heals more than Bloodthirster, all while doing 1500 damage crits in an AoE cone. She gets 60% attack speed almost permanently since her Q has permanent uptime as well. Most other ADCs have downtime in between their attack speed buffs. Although in her defense, Nila needs all of this. If anything, she's proof of how valuable range is in League when you have to compensate her with all this extra crap just to give her a fighting chance against Jinx, Caitlyn, Ezreal, Vayne and stuff. Okay, let's move on to some more utility-centric abilities for the remainder of the video. One of my personal gripes will be Zilean Z, Time Warp. A very short ability description, but any person who one-tricks melee champions will tell you that this ability... Oh my god. Simple premise, he either ultra zooms a friendly or ultra slows a baddie. More than Chrono Shift or Time Bomb, Time Warp is Zilean's best ability in my opinion. Tempo might be the most powerful stat in the game because anything and everything in League is about positioning. The faster you get to someplace or can move away from someplace, the stronger you are. You get to a team fight even 2 seconds earlier than the enemy laner, those 2 seconds could be enough to end the fight before they get there. Making anyone on Zilean's team no longer have mobility issues is a massive blessing. Likewise, damn near immobilizing any member of the enemy team for 2.5 seconds can functionally negate their pressure just like that. While it may not be an actual rune, a 99-second slow is so high that even with slow resist from Cloud Drake, Swifties, or that one rune shard, Time Warp will still knock you down to the 110 minimum. One cast of Time Warp is enough to make you feel like a sitting duck even if your champion has mobility, but Zilean can get 2 casts of his E per rotation. He could slow an enemy for 5 seconds, speed up an ally for 5 seconds, or do half and half. Either way, he can make it next to impossible for you to catch him or his teammates, and he can make it next to impossible for you to run away. Players often don't think of slows or tempo increases as all that compared to an actual stun or dash because usually the amounts are anywhere between 20 to 40 seconds. Anything more than that has only a 1 second duration or less like a Darius W. But Zilean has a long duration and a high value, making Time Warp all the more frustrating to deal with. Second to last ability I want to go over will be Singe's W, Mega Adhesive, yet another ability that doesn't really do a whole lot on paper, but man is it annoying when you actually make use of it properly. Granted, it has gotten noticeably buffed over the years. On activation, Singe creates a puddle on the ground for 3 seconds that heavily slows and grounds all enemies within it. Like I mentioned in the Zilean section, rarely do you ever find a slow that's both a long duration and a high value, it's usually one or the other. In Singe's case, if he forces the enemy team to walk through his W from one end to the other, you're staring at up to a 70% slow for 3 seconds, and unlike other slowing fields, you cannot dash out of this one if you're already standing inside it. Alongside silence, grounding is one of the most insidious crowd controls in the game, especially given how mobility dependent champions are nowadays. It even prevents usage of any mobility based items or summoners like Rocket Belt and Flash. There is also the niche interaction that Singed has with Fling, making it so anyone who gets thrown into his W from his E gets actually rooted. You don't see it happening too often, but even without that extra component, just having a way to heavily slow and ground enemies from a long distance makes Mega Adhesive both a pursuit tool and an escape option if you think about it. You can throw it to slow down enemies while you catch up to them and gas them to Kingdom Come. Alternatively, if you're running away, Singe can drop it behind him to prevent you from chasing him. In addition to Poison Trail perpetually slowing you once he gets realized, Mega Adhesive makes it really difficult for you to either chase him or run away from him once he sets up on you. There's also a psychological aspect to it where even though champions can just walk through Mega Adhesive, no one wants to willingly walk through his W, and so they might feel blocked off and pressured to turn around and fight or give up the chase on him just because of the inconvenience factor. Again, it's not an overpowered ability by any means, but this video is all about the abilities that I think are underrated. Final ability will be Victor's W, Gravity Field. It bears many of the same properties as Mega Adhesive, wherein Victor creates a circle that slows enemies who walk through it. But instead of grounding them, if they stay in gravity field for too long, they eventually get stunned and more importantly, knocked down. I've seen people try to dash out of Victor W only for their dash to get interrupted right before they make it out, and they're basically screwed. Additionally, when augmented, he essentially acquires a Rally's passive for free. By far the most underrated ability in his kit, especially in teamfights. Turning the slow into a 1.5 second AoE stun is already a big deal, but much like Singe's W, it's the psychological aspect of Gravity Field that makes it so strong. As soon as people see Gravity Field, they'll stop focusing on Victor even for a short moment and instead try to get out of his W despite W not being all that scary for the first second or two, relative to, other stuff. This can make people hesitate or lose focus for a brief moment during a fight, or in teamfights, for example, if the enemy Malphite engages on your team and Victor drops a W between him and his team trying to follow up, they might be discouraged to walk through Gravity Field because no one wants to willingly walk into a stun. In short, the threat of Gravity Field is often more impactful than the actual effect itself. It's not something that presents an active concern for the player, but it does force them to include it in their list of things to be aware of. Only unlike Maokai and Singed, getting stunned can and often does result in death in the mid to late game, making it one of the more underrated zoning tools in the game. It would be way more straightforward to fight Victor if not for his W. Alrighty, so that concludes my second episode of Broken Abilities No One Talks About. Let me know in the comments down below what are some other underrated moves you think are worth mentioning, and if the series keeps doing well, you can expect to find a part 3 coming out sometime in the near future. For the time being, if you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate it if you'd like to like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out the first episode of this series if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.